Good evening, and you're all very welcome to tonight's webinar, which is being brought to you tonight by the Teagasc advisory staff here in County Mayo. My name is Brendan Garry, and I work in Teagasc and Ballinrobe. And tonight, for the next hour, I'm delighted to be your host for this webinar. Now, this evening's webinar is the third episode in a new 4-part series of webinars, which will run throughout the month of February, each Wednesday night at 8 p.m, and the same link will work for each episode. Now, during this new series, we have covered some of the key agricultural issues facing Irish farming in 2023, and tonight will be no different. And tonight, the focus switches to looking at a range of environmental matters, including an update on the new Acre scheme, which my colleague Tom Kelly from Teagasc Ballina will present to us shortly. And later on, my colleague Mary Roache from Teagasc Westport will discuss some water quality trends, and Mary will tell us about some new initiatives in water quality that's coming down the line, so stay tuned for that. Now, you, the viewers, are being encouraged to engage with our speakers here tonight, and we ask you, as always, to type your questions into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your phones, screens, or tablets. And later this evening, Vivian Silke, the Teagasc Regional Manager here for County Mayo, will put your questions live to our panelists. So please type your questions into the Q&A box. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch back in the coming days on the Teagasc Mayo YouTube channel. So, without further delay, I'll now ask you, Tom, to start sharing your presentation with us, and it's over to you now, Tom.
Okay, thanks, Brendan, and good evening to our listeners. So I'm here tonight to talk about the Acre scheme, and it's a scheme, I suppose, that has generated huge interest among the farming public. And it's the flagship agri-environmental scheme administered by the Department of Agriculture. €1.5 billion has been allocated to date for the scheme. It's a successor to the GLAS scheme, which has been hugely popular among farmers here in the west of Ireland. The Acres is designed to deliver long-term environmental improvements, both in terms of water quality, and there's a lot of talk at the moment about water quality and the deterioration in water quality and the impact farming is having on water quality. In terms of biodiversity, we're talking there about the insects, the bees, the flowering plants, the mammals, the pollinators. And, there's a decline in biodiversity here in Ireland, but also it's a worldwide issue. In terms of climate change and air quality, farmers have signed up to targets for climate change and, for ammonia emissions and greenhouse gases. And these schemes, they need to deliver, on these issues. So with the Acres, it's a new scheme, and I suppose there's a new approach in that there's a cooperation element to it, and then there's the general scheme. So 46,000 farmers applied to join the scheme, and the scheme was open there before Christmas 2022. So a huge number of farmers joined. 28,000 are in the general scheme, we're told, with 18,000 in the cooperation area. So the Department of Agriculture are dealing with all these plans at the moment, and they hope to issue approval letters in early March. So at the moment, they're fine-tuning, working in the background on checks on participants with minor queries and that sort of thing. So they will be in contact with participants in early March, and they hope to issue plans to farmers sometime in April. So it will be important at that point that farmers would read the plans in detail and maybe contact their planners to discuss the issues there and the actions that they chose. So look at to talk a little about the cooperation zones. You can see there from the map, we're in West Connacht there, the West Connacht CP local area. A huge amount of the land is designated CP. The 6 different areas with different actions required in all these areas. So Aris there is in the pink. It's a huge area there. You have Achill and Naomh in the brown, the Ox Mountains and Lough Carra. So further south, then you have North Connemara. You have Corba and Mask. A lot of this is lake, but equally lake shores and water courses that feed into those lakes. So these areas are selected. A lot of farmers are asking how their lands are included in CP maybe, and other lands are not. So generally, semi-natural type vegetation, that would be lands not improved as such for agriculture, not receiving much fertilizers, both owned and commonage. So a large proportion of the land in these areas would be commonage as well. Natura lands, that would be lands designated as SACs or SPAs, and there'll be special restrictions on those areas as agreed with the National Parks and Wildlife Service. Priority water catchments, and we talked about water quality, and the EPA have designated certain rivers and streams as high priority areas, and around those areas, around those rivers and streams, land has been included in these CP areas, and also areas of significant carbon stores. And generally speaking, that would be peaty soils. They store significant quantities of carbons. So these 8 CP zones are managed by the Acres West Connacht team, and they will be notified in due course as to the farmers participating in the scheme. And we're told that there's 8,000 herd numbers in those mapped areas they are the coloured areas on the map, and close to 5,000 of them have joined the Acres scheme. So there's a huge body of work. From July, there'll be farmer training provided for farmers in these areas that have joined the Acres, and from August and September, they'll be able to select some supporting actions there and claim additional monies. So look, I'm just going on to talk about the popular measures there under the Acre scheme, particularly under the general scheme. We're talking about the extensively grazed pasture, and that has been there under the GLAS scheme in the past. You can have a maximum inclusion of 8 hectares there, and a payment of €250 per hectare. So a lot of farms would have this extensively grazed pasture. That's why it's a very popular action. Very similar to the traditional hay meadow and the low input permanent pasture there in GLAS. So you can graze these fields or you can cut them, but you have to wait until the 1st of July before you can do so. Maximum nitrogen application of 40 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. That's your chemical fertilizer and your organic manures like slurries. Pesticides and herbicides are fairly limited except for spot spraying. And again, rushes can be controlled by weed wiping or spot spraying after the 1st of July, or indeed by topping after the 1st of July. But the new action, or the new bit of work that has to be included here, is the water courses must be fenced at least 1.5 meters back when bovines are present, and no drinking points. So the whole idea behind this is that it's a drive to improve water quality. And, supplementary feeding over the winter, certainly of silage is out. Hay and concentrates are allowed. So look, that's a picture of the low input grassland. You have a variety of flowering plants there. Sorry, that's going on to the LIG, the low input grassland. That's a different action. That's only recommended, I suppose, for farmers that have a lot of these flowering plants. A maximum inclusion there of 10 hectares. So the payment here is based on a scorecard, and the lands will be scored in years 1, 3, and 5. And that scoring will take place in the months of June, July, and August. And look at, there's no rules as such, but if you want to score highly and score well, you need to reduce the nutrient input on those fields. And in terms of the grazing management, if we come out to score the fields and they've been grazed severely, grazed down very low, or they've been cut for hay or silage, the field is going to score very poorly. And again, the cover of ryegrass must be low on those fields. So certainly you won't get those flowers, those flowering plants, in a field where there's a lot of ryegrass. So the payment there is good if you have those flowers, and an additional payment there if it's mown in July and August. So the one advice, I suppose, to give to farmers is, if they're thinking of cutting for hay or silage, contact their planner. Wait until the planner has scored the fields before they do any work in that regard, or their score will be very poor. So again, just contrasting pictures there of your low input grassland there to the left with a variety of flowering plants. It's going to score well. It's high scoring for biodiversity. Maybe it's low, very poor for food production in terms of yields of silage, or kilos of beef per hectare, or kilo of beef produced, or lamb. So the field to the right there is your more typical ryegrass field, but that's not going to score for this low input grassland, and it shouldn't be included in it. So as I said, this is a massive change. It's a big change both for the farmer, it's a change for the planner, and it's a change for the department as well. These results-based schemes have been working well in other areas, like in the Burn Life, in the Hen Harrier, and the Pearl Mussel project, where farmers are incentivized to improve their score over time. So what we see in general is that, in a lot of cases where we go out for the first year or two, the score might be at a 4 or 5, but over time, if the farmer manages the field correctly, reduces the nutrients, and manages the field, he might bring up his score to an 8 or a 9. So we'd expect very few fields scored in maybe a 10 out of 10, we'll say. So that's the league, and we would have some lands included. Some farmers certainly did select that. So again, as I said, we talked about the cooperation zones, and the payments in these CP areas will all be results-based as well. So that creates a huge workload for the advisors, and in the CP area, the CP teams will set the scorecard. So you could have a grassland scorecard, you could have a peatland scorecard, a woodland scorecard, whatever the case may be. So they'll set the scorecard, and the planners or advisors will walk the farm and score the farm. Again, Jordan, we're told this is all going to happen in the months of June, July, and August. And the CP teams themselves will score and walk the commonages. So huge amount of commonage areas. And bear in mind, a lot of these commonages have been scored before under things like the Wild Atlantic Nature, schemes like the Wild Atlantic Nature, where farmers have been paid a results-based payment, indeed, on these commonage areas. So you can see there, the one thing I suppose to point out with any of those results-based schemes is if you score less than 4, you get no payment. And whether it's the CP or the Acres general scheme, if you're scoring less than 4, no payment, and that's a worry, I suppose, that farmers who would have signed up maybe in a CP zone, we'll say, if they were near maybe some of these high priority water catchments, and they might have improved grassland, and we go out to score that grassland, it'll score very poorly. But we'd expect most people in the CP zones maybe to be scored on the 6, 7, and 8s, let's hope, and they'll get a fairly decent payment. So the idea being, as I said, is that the score can improve over time, and the payment over the years, if a farmer manages correctly, the score can improve. And 10 out of 10 gives €400 per hectare. Just on the bottom screen, a lot of interest in the organic scheme, and organic farmers can get a low payment in the CP area, results based, but they're already getting a high payment. That's why their payment is reduced under the organic farming scheme. So moving on then to talk about the riparian zones and that. The idea being to protect water quality from sediment and nutrient runoff, and available both to grassland and arable farmers. Basically, these areas are fenced off from the 15th of May, and they're stock proof. The idea being that a high bank of vegetation grows up, no chemical or organic fertilizer allowed, no pesticides, naturally enough, you're close to watercourses and streams. So cutting is permitted from the 1st of September. So the big drawback, I suppose, is you cannot have animals grazing that area. And the riparian zone is a very popular action, a high rate of payment on it, €1,530 per hectare. So a maximum inclusion there of 2 hectares. And the riparian strips, bear in mind, a lot of farmers were in glass and they already have these fences up. So, the payment there, €1.30 for the 1.5 meters. So they can continue to get paid. Planting hedges, there's a huge interest in planting hedges, and maybe just to say from the start, this is a good time of the year for planting hedges, February, March, but certainly to say to farmers not to plant hedges at the moment until they get their letter of approval. They have until the 31st of March 2024 to plant hedges, so there's plenty of time. And as I say, we see that there's a huge interest in planting hedgerows, equally under the eco schemes, and for the Space for Nature now under the BIS payments and the eco scheme payments going forward. So look, at the payment is quite generous under the Acre scheme for planting hedgerows. I know there's a bit of work involved in it, but it's €5.29 per metre per year, and you get that for the 5 years. Or if the Acre scheme is extended like the glass scheme, you'll get it for the length of the scheme. So you get that each year, and it's a huge benefit, I suppose, to your farm in terms of shelter, biodiversity, protecting water quality, and that enhancing anyone's farm. So 5 plants per metre in a double staggered row, just to make it as easy as possible for yourself, that you'd cultivate the ground beforehand, and that you'd fence off the hedge and protect it from livestock. And as I said, completed by March next year. So there's plenty of time yet for that. And the most popular species there is the whitethorn or hawthorn, but maybe there's a few other species there that might be worth considering. In terms of hedgerow rejuvenation, you can see the hedge on the left there it's a very old hedge that's more or less gone out of control. So the copsing there is cutting it down very low at the base with a chainsaw and allowing it to resprout or grow, and has to be completed by 31st of December 2024. Again, the idea being that you don't do this work during the bird nesting season. Again, you have to fence both sides to protect the young regrowth, and you plant saplings there, young quicks there in the spaces. You can just make them out there in the picture. So that's the copsing, and it turns out quite well with old gappy hedges. And the laying there, more labor intensive, a higher payment, again completed by the same day, and quite a skilled labor intensive job there, but a great stock proof hedge afterwards. In terms of a very popular action, and a lot of land in the area has been designated for the geese and swans, and equally maybe for the breeding waders. But I suppose particularly for the geese and swans, you're providing a sward of grass there over the winter period from October to March for these overwintering geese. Bearing in mind these geese and swans are winter migratory birds that come in from the likes of Greenland. They need to build up fat reserves to make it back to these countries in the springtime. So they need plenty of lush green grass, no disturbance, no slurry spreading either, so very much suitable for cattle farms where, they're fairly well stocked and fairly intensive, and lush grass there. Planting trees, again, is it's a popular enough action. Quite a high payment per tree, €6.21, maximum of 300 trees. The trees need to be fenced off and protected, certainly from livestock, and most trees require a staked tree shelter there to give them the best chance of survival. And the trees must have a plant passport, just as the whitethorn quicks, so that you're not spreading disease or bringing in trees maybe from foreign shores. And grass and vegetation to be controlled, and equally with the hedges, look at putting down a biodegradable film or some sort of bark mulch, or that to slow down the growth of the weeds is always a big help there. In terms of the rare breeds, quite a number of farmers have Connemara ponies and Irish Draft, and as long as they're registered with the Breed Society, member of the recognised Breed Society, they can get a fairly decent payment there, €200 per livestock unit per year, and it gave them a higher priority or a higher ranking in terms of getting into the Acre scheme. So they're the ones: the Kerry Bog pony, the Irish Moyle, the Curry cattle, and the Dexter cattle. And again, some of these animals, Dexters and Irish Moyle, would be involved maybe in would be hardy animals, very suitable for grazing commonage lands, which is important as well, that these commonages, to be eligible for the scheme, you need to be active on the commonage and grazing those areas. Archaeological features, again, if you have those features on your farm, there's a payment there of €125 in a grassland situation. And again, just the management of vegetation not to be carried out during the bird nesting season there is important. So prevent the growth of scrub and that. The low emission slurry spreading, look at a lot of these machines being bought. There's a grant aid to help farmers purchase them. And look, it's a good news story in terms of improving recycling of organic fertilizer, reducing the nitrogen losses, reducing emissions of ammonia and the odors and smells. And you know, the nitrogen, you get 3 or 4 units extra nitrogen by spreading your slurry with these machines. And you can get a payment there, €1.20 per cubic metre. Farmers look at over 100 kilos of organic nitrogen per hectare will be required under the Nitrates Directive to spread their slurry with the low emissions slurry spreading techniques, so they kind of get paid in that regard. So farmers under the 100 kilos, and the important thing is they are to stay under the 100 kilos for the duration of the scheme. And that's the story on that. So the winter bird food was known as the wild bird cover in the past, and some farmers grew it, and look at they got used to growing it, I suppose, over the 5 and 6 years of the GLAS scheme, and they're continuing to grow it now. And look at the key date there is the 15th of May, and the 15th of May every year to get your crop established. So look at to source the seed. You know, don't leave it till the 10th of May to start looking for your seed. A lot of farmers put in a hectare of that, but you can have a maximum of 3 hectares. A decent enough payment there of €1,000 per hectare. You cannot harvest the crop, only leave it for the birds there, and you know, has been useful to benefit farmland birds. The traditional stone wall maintenance, very much a feature, I suppose, of Ballinrobe country and down into North Galway. A maximum inclusion there of €4,000, just that you know, you'd maintain the walls in a good fashion, but no mortar on the walls. Keep them, you know, built up with the traditional fashion there, and the payment 76 cents per metre per year, or a reasonable payment for it. So finally, on the commonage, you know, most of the commonages, I suppose, are in the CP, the cooperation areas, but you have some commonages that are not. So again, these areas will be scored by the cooperation teams, and we talked about a score of less than 4 won't give you any score or any payment. The score of 10 there will deliver a payment to €220 per hectare. Commonages less than 10 hectares, a payment of €120 per hectare. So we'd expect, you know, a lot of these commonages have been scored already, and we have a fair idea how they're scored. And things that will reduce the score on commonage would be, you know, areas that are not grazed, where there's rank vegetation and indeed the scrub encroachment, and that can happen too. And then equally areas that are very much overgrazed, particularly down near roadways and areas where livestock are being fed, where there's a lot of turf cutting, and maybe a dumping in some cases as well. So look, we expect that farmers will be tuning into the scores that they receive. They will be trained and updated on the scores that these commonage areas are getting, and over time we expect that the scores will increase, and that's, I suppose, the mainstay of these results-based schemes. So I suppose that's the conclusion, I suppose, of the Acre scheme. Just to say it's a learning curve and a new departure, both for the farmers, for ourselves, and the department. And it's back to you now, Brendan.
That's brilliant, Tommy. I just get you just to stop sharing your screen there, and just while we're in the process of changing over, thanks for that rundown of the measures there, Tom. And indeed, look, we'll give you a chance there to catch your breath. And at this stage, we'll ask our colleague there, Mary Roache from Teagasc Westport, to start sharing your presentation, Mary. And it's over to you now, Mary. And indeed, there's plenty of time yet for questions. We have over 170 farmers on, so you know, get the questions in there for Tom or for Mary. So I'll just get you just to turn on your camera as well, Mary, and that's perfect now. Okay, so thanks now very much, Mary. That's perfect now, Mary. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm going to speak tonight on water quality, and I'm just going to give you a quick run through of what's coming down the tracks, or what we have maybe locally happening. And we have something coming in the summertime that may be of interest to some of you, which is going to be a new waters EIP And as well as that, I'm going to just give you a quick run through the Lough Carra Life project, which has been launched as well out around Lough Carra, Carnacon direction. So first of all, as regards the water quality, look at the EPA are the body that are tasked with evaluating and publishing all the figures as regards to water quality in this country. And just this is a national figure I'm going to show you here for surface waters. So where are we at with it? As regards the EPA, the figures are here at the moment is that for all surface waters nationally, we have 14% are in a high status, 40% good, 30% moderate, 15% poor, and a 0.4% bad. So they're the classifications that they have there at the minute. And just so as you're aware, the obligation that is on us here as a country is that we are to get all of our surface waters to at least good status by 2027. So as you can see, we have a big body of work ahead of us, given the figures that the EPA are showing us there nationally. Now, they are national figures and there's huge variances from region to region. So I'm going to concentrate more on the region that we are in ourselves. So if you look here, and I'm speaking here about the Western region, and when I say the Western region is, in this case, Mayo, Galway and Roscommon. And the EPA figures are that within the Western region, a total of 248 monitored river and lake water bodies within the West region are currently achieving their Water Framework Directive environmental objective. And that objective, as I've told you, is that they're reaching at least good status. And it's the case that if we have a water body that in the past had been high status, then it's expected to be high status again. Good will not be good enough for those areas. If they were high in the past, their objective is to be high again in the future. Okay, so just a higher aspiration for those ones. Now, there has been some significant improvement across most of the significant pressure types, but there's still water bodies that are impacted by pressures. And the pressures in the Western region, and again, like I said, the figure will be different if I was to look down in the southeast or different areas of the country, but we'll concentrate on where we are. So really, we have two pressures there that are very close together. We have hydromorphology and agriculture shown as a pressure. Now, hydromorphology, basically, in layman's terms, to put it to you, is more or less like channelization, drainage, anything that will alter the course of a drain or a stream or a water body. Hydromorphology, you will find in farming, we affect it by opening and new drains or widening drains and channels. Now, farming isn't the only thing that has an impact here. We have the OPW, who are tasked with the arterial drainage program in the country. And so they also have a big input into hydromorphology there. We have agriculture as well, of course, as a significant pressure in the catchments. And that's without doubt true, because if you look at any catchment out there, generally speaking, unless it's an urban catchment, when you look around, you see a lot of farming going on within the catchment. It's the biggest thing that's happening within a lot of catchments. Now, in third place there is forestry. And again, that's very variable from one catchment to another. If I go into certain catchments, there are a few catchments where I work, and forestry is actually the main pressure in the catchment. So look, just to give you, that's an overall view of within the Western region, but just be aware that it varies from catchment to catchment. So no two are the same, and we take them as we find them, okay? Now, there has been a water quality improvement in 75 water bodies here in the Western region, but unfortunately, this has been offset by a decline in 69 water bodies. So it's just unfortunate. While we do make gains in some areas where we're working, we at the same time are still having this decline in other water bodies. And like I said, if this continues, it will be very, very hard for us to reach our objective of everything being at least good status by 2027. So that's where we are at within this Western region just at the moment, the latest figures that I have from the EPA. And just something to let you know about, if you haven't already heard, we have here in Mayo, and concentrating in Mayo now, we have what we call priority areas for action. Now, these areas were selected because of the fact that there were pressures within the areas, and there were significant water bodies. We look at Carramore Lake, it's a drinking water source. Loch Mask is also a drinking water source. You go out to the Bunown and Lewisburg drinking water source. Bundurka is freshwater pearl mussel area. And we have other areas there. They've all been chosen for a reason. And we have catchment scientists who have worked within these areas, and they have done detailed studies within the areas to find out, first of all, what actually is the water quality. And after what is the water quality, they also look to see what is the trend. Is it going down or is it going up? If I work out in Bundurka, the water quality there is very high. That's where the pearl mussel is. But the trend was trending downwards, and that's why they decided to work within this catchment. So they look at the quality as it is at the minute, but they also look at the trend to see which way it's going. Then what they do is they look and see what is the significant pressure, what is putting pressure on the water bodies within these 13 priority areas for action. If the catchment scientists find that it is an agricultural issue that is putting pressure on the waters, then they will ask either myself or my colleague Peter Comer to come into these catchment areas and to work with the farmers within the catchment and speak to them and do what we provide. Actually, myself and Peter here is we will provide a confidential free service to farmers where we go out and we'll do a farm plan for you if you are within these catchments and water quality is seen to be a pressure from agriculture within the catchment. We will do a free farm plan for you, giving you advice as to what you can do on your farm to mitigate against anything getting into the waters that we do not want getting into the waters. So please just take a quick look at that map and think to yourself, where is your land? Do you fall within one of these priority areas for action? And if you do, like I said, you can avail of our free service, which we have. And again, this is something that is going to be linked in with the new Waters EIP that is coming down the track as well. So there may be funding coming into these particular areas to help people in these areas to improve water quality on their farm if it's seen to be an issue. Okay, so there's the 13 areas. Think of where your own farm is in this map. So like I said, we're the ASAP program, and what we do is we look and see what are the significant agricultural pressures within an area. Now, this graph just shows you what are the significant pressures, and the main pressure that is seen to be coming from agriculture is phosphorus loss. And you'll see it in brackets written diffuse. 31% of the pressure is coming from phosphorus loss, diffuse. Diffuse means basically that it's been lost out on land. It's not in the farmyard, it's not a point source, it's out on land. The second pressure there is actually sedimentation. So first we have phosphorus loss, the next one is sedimentation. After that we have nitrogen loss, diffuse, again out on land at 16%, followed by point source losses, toxicity and pesticides, that is a big issue in certain catchments, and then followed by ammonia. So they are the pressures that are happening in catchments. And it's something that I always kind of try and get people to focus on. Sometimes you make a huge effort in your farmyard and you do absolutely everything right that you can. Your farmyard is lovely and clean and tidy. Everything is collected, stored properly. Your evenings are working. You're keeping your yards clean. You're being very particular about your farmyard. But just to focus you that when you look here, the biggest losses, they're happening actually out on land. So you could be doing absolutely everything correct in your farmyard. The farmer could look really clean and tidy and doing everything right. But that in itself is no use if you then go and have an issue out on land in that you're spreading at the wrong time, you're not keeping your buffer zones, you're not keeping back far enough from your drains, and that goes for dry drains as well as rivers and streams. Like every drain is eventually going to end up in a river or a stream. And also that you're not watching the weather. So land management and nutrient management, that's a huge, huge issue. And I just need people to pay particular attention to that when they're working on the land. So water quality is declining. That's just a fact nationally. The main issues, as I've said, are diffuse loss of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. And they're the three main ones. Now, this side of the country, really, phosphorus is a huge issue, and sediment loss. You get a lot of sediment loss if people are opening drains. Also, if cattle are drinking points out of a drain, if you reseed and you don't keep a margin back and you get a heavy rainfall, it'll wash sediment in. And nitrogen, you lose nitrogen from a very light, free draining clay type soil, whereas phosphorus, you lose it from a more heavy type of soil, and you lose the phosphorus through overland flow. So that's why you can see a lot of the land we have in this county will be more prone to the losses of phosphorus compared to the loss of nitrogen. You go down to the south and southeast in particular, the southeast would have a huge problem with a loss of nitrogen due to their soil type compared to ourselves. So they're the three main issues that we have. And again, like I said, they're all linked to soil type, weather, and farm practice. So like I said, soil type be very aware of what type of soil you have, because the type of soil you have will dictate the type of loss or potential losses you can have, whether it will be nitrogen or phosphorus. The weather, you have to check the weather, any jobs you're doing now on farm, particularly spreading slurry at this time of the year. You have to keep an eye on the forecast, and farm practice as well. So now I did mention earlier to have a good look at the map and see where you were in PAAs, and I'm going to get to the reason of why I wanted you to think about that. There is a new program coming, and it's a Waters EIP. Now, it just has gone through a tendering process in January. At the end of January, it went out to tender back into the department. So we are waiting on a little bit more information on it, but it's a definite project that is coming towards us. It will be a national scheme, and this scheme will be guided by scientific evidence. In other words, PIP maps. In other words, they will look to see where losses are occurring to waters, and they will use that scientific evidence to guide where they're going to put the finance basically in this. It's to promote and incentivize the adoption of innovative best practice in nutrient management and other suitable measures. It will be a 5-year project, and it's 50 million for the measures, of which 30 million must be spent in the first 3 years. So look that's a lot of finance coming in there to be spent in the first 3 years. Now, still always just to be conscious of the fact that there will not be ever, in any case, a double funding. If you're already getting funded for something if it's in acres or if it's in some other type of program area that you're in and you're getting funded, you won't get a double funding in this. But if there is something that you need funding for that will improve water quality, then this might be something that will really interest you. Now, the measures that are being mentioned for the water CIP, and as I say, mentioned because they are not just written in stone yet, and we don't have the spec out yet, but more than likely this is what they'll be. Water retention measures to reduce or eliminate critical sediment, phosphorus and pesticide sources and transport, and particularly along riparian corridors. Riparian corridors are more your buffer zones and your vegetative cover along drains, which act as a buffer to stop anything getting into your watercourses. Grazing and livestock management as well, to avoid poaching maybe of areas that are heavily stocked along rivers as well, to prevent any runoff of sediment as well as phosphorus. And detailed nutrient management planning and reduction in inputs is another thing that has been suggested. And one that I think now is going to be very relevant for this side of the country is targeted control of access to watercourses by livestock. And included in that is spoken that there will be finance for provision of alternative drinking water supply, whether that be by solar panels or nose pump, okay? So it seemed to be a massive issue here as regards sediment getting into watercourses. And that's what catchment scientists are telling me anytime they're out and they're doing their evaluations. If it's sediment, a lot of it is coming from cattle access points and drinking points. So this scheme would really help towards helping in that way. Also, it's been spoken about, there are certain areas of the country now, I think Donegal has a particular issue with sheep dipping facilities, but they are to be found everywhere. Decommissioning of sheep dipping facilities. And in this, we're talking about the more older facilities, because they were built back in a time when the awareness was not there as regards water quality. And obviously, they were built in inappropriate areas of course, where they would be easily filled, easily emptied. And like I said, a complete lack of awareness as regards water quality back in the day when some of them older facilities were put in place. So there is talks of now decommissioning them, and there may be payments for farmers to upgrade facilities. Of course, now there may be, if that's already in TAMS, you could maybe look for there either. But also there is talks of maybe paying for a contractor to come in and mobile dip sheep for people where they don't have adequate facilities. Again, this will all be much clearer once the spec comes out. So we'll just keep in contact with us, and when that spec comes out, we will be letting you know. Again, capital expenditure related to farm sustainability plan implementation, non-productive investments. So look, there's some things you may need to do on farm that we're called non-productive investments. There might be something like you're looking at bigger farmers now, maybe down south, where they have a massive cattle crossing over the river on a daily basis. They may come in with finance for those people to put a culvert in, so the animals aren't walking through the water. Again, like I said, this is all under discussion at the minute, but it has been strongly mentioned. Look, at all these things are going to be targeted towards water quality. Now, the priority access to get into this water EIP, it has been said that priority access will be given, first of all, to farmers in these areas for action with an ASAP farm sustainability plan. And that's why I was saying to you to please make yourself aware of whether you are within one of those priority areas for action or not. And so if myself and Peter call out and do a farm visit, these farm visits are totally confidential, and again, they're totally voluntary as well. But if we call out and do a farm plan with you and walk your farm with you and pinpoint a few areas that you need to change to upgrade so that the water quality will be better from your side of the farm. If you now need finance to put in place, say it's just fencing off a particular area, there might be a very wet area in your land that's getting a lot of losses to water through one certain point in your farm that's along a water course. If you need to put a fence extra further back from there, or you need to put in new drinking water troughs somewhere, then this is something that maybe you will get financed for, but you must have a farm sustainability plan drawn up saying that this is what you require. And there's no problem, you contact myself or Peter on that one. Also, priority is spoken for farms that are in the local authority area for action, which are restore water bodies or protect. And just to mention, restore water bodies are ones that have fallen down, that maybe they're at poor status and they need to come to good, need to be restored back to good. So of course they will target those to try and bring them back up to where they should be. Protect water bodies are ones that they might be good at the minute, but that the trend is downwards. And while they're ticking the box because they're good, you can see the trend is downwards. And so the local authority are saying we need to protect these. So we need to put a bit of work in here and not let them slip into being poor or moderate. So that's what has been spoken about at the minute as regards priority access into this water EIP. So like I said, just keep your ears open on that one, because it's something that may be of good use, and it's something you should check out anyhow when it comes out. And just now to run into another local project that is ongoing at the minute, and that's the Lough Carra Life project. And they're improving the ecosystem resilience and reducing nutrient pollution of Lough Carra, which is one of Europe's premier SAC marl lakes. And I just have, again, a map put up there, and that is Lough Carra. And Lough Carra, again, does feed down into Lough Mask, which is a drinking water source. So you'll see there's a black outline on the map, and that's just at the minute a map drawn showing the hinterland of inputting waters as we have it at the minute. Of course, it's changing as more evaluations are being done, but as we stand at the minute, this is the hinterland that may come into this scheme. Now, Lough Carra itself, it's a 16 kilometre squared in area. It's a shallow lake, mostly less than 2 meters in depth, and it has within it occasional depths there as well. And Geological Survey of Ireland have located a lot of inputting springs that are like deep holes within the actual lake as well. So you will see darker depths appearing within the lake that they have identified. It's got 3 distinct but connected basins. Now, the lake itself is fed by small rivers and groundwater from throughout an area of about 100 kilometres squared. So there is a huge amount of evaluations being done out here at the minute, because while there is a lot of surface water and they're clear to see feeding into this lake, there's a huge amount of groundwater feeding also in as well. And there's a huge body of work to do to actually trace the way that groundwater flows, and does it actually contribute into that lake. And that's being carried out by Geological Survey Ireland at the minute. The geology of the area is limestone karst, so that's the same as the burden, and that's why you do get a lot of water heading downwards and a lot of groundwater. There are some well-known springs, but some also that are not so well known. And so they need to be constantly mapped and traced. And that is a body of work, as I said. So if any of you are from that area and you have a sinking stream, or you have a swallow hole, or you have Turla or that there, it's important that it will be identified on the actual map so we can get a full picture of exactly what is contributing to that lake.
Mary, just a couple of minutes now, Mary, okay?
Yeah, no bother, nearly there. The general flow of the surface water is from northeast to southwest, and that's what you would actually expect, because at the end of the day, everything tries to find its way towards the sea. Main causes of changes to the lake is increased nutrient inputs from agriculture, and Lough Carra is very naturally low in phosphorus and nitrogen, and the species that continue and communities that live there, they're well adapted to them low conditions. So increases in nutrients can cause large-scale changes because you're really tipping the balance out in that lake. Another issue that's been identified is conversion of semi-natural habitats to improve grassland. So this is, look at an issue that where you have an improvement of land out there and made more productive, then nutrients are going onto that land, and then you have less of this non-agricultural land around the lake that can absorb the actual nutrients, and it has a huge impact on biodiversity. So just to finish up, just to say, this Lough Carra Life project, it's money that was granted by the European Commission of Life. It's 5 million. This again is a five-year project. Like I said, 5 million in funding. Its coordinating body there is Mayo County Council, and it's unique in that it's the first life project in Ireland actually to be led by the local authority. So that's been coordinated by Mayo County Council, and it has associated beneficiaries there: Department of Agriculture, National Parks, Geological Survey of Ireland, Huicha, and the Lough Carra Association that are out there. And I have to say, the Lough Carra Association had an interest, and they're a community of people who had an interest in the lake and in trying to improve the lake, and they really started this whole process there. So it just goes to show what you can do in a local area if you have people that are interested and that are willing to just put a bit of work into it, what can happen. So look, I know we're running short on time, so I'll leave it there at that, and I'll take questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks very much now, Mary, for that. Yeah, I'll just get you to stop sharing your presentation, and we'll bring back our speaker Tom there, and we'll hand it over to you now, Vivian. So over to you, Vivian. Thanks again now, Mary, for that, and still time to get your questions in. So good evening, Vivian, and over to you now.
Thanks, Brendan, and thanks to Mary and Tom for their insightful presentations. Mary, I'll let you catch your breath there for a minute. There's a couple of questions for Tom. Tom, the first one, which is one we've all been wondering about since Christmas. When can farmers expect to know if they've been accepted into acres? I know you covered in your presentation, but maybe just to repeat the timeframes.
Okay, Vivian, approval letters, we're told, will issue to farmers in early March. I know this date has been extended several times, but the numbers of farmers that the department are dealing with are very large, and they're having some minor processing difficulties. The Minister himself, Charlie McConalogue, is very keen that all farmers who applied for the scheme would participate in the scheme. That's all we know at this point.
Okay, thanks for just reconfirming that, Tom. Next one, which is a connected one. In terms of the rare breeds, you had photos of them up in the presentation, Tom. Is there any payment for donkeys, and are they classified as a rare breed?
Not that I know of, Vivian. There's a list there, in the department specifications, and I don't see anything in relation to donkeys on that list. So no is the answer.
It's kind of horses. The Kerry Bog Pony, I think the Irish Draft, the Connemara's, and so forth. Yeah.
Yes.
Nothing for the donkeys, unfortunately. Okay. Another one for you, Tom, is in terms of the scoring. You mentioned it for the league. In terms of the plants and the rare flowers we want to see. Can my score go down over the 5 years of playing? I know the anticipation is that they will go up, but is it possible that the score could go down?
Yes, it all depends on the management that the farmer, undertakes in these areas, in these fields. So yes, of course, the score can go down. But we would hope that, if the farmer is well tuned in there and he's keen to improve his payment, that the score will go up.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Another rather general question, and maybe it's anticipation of joining the Acre scheme this year, whenever that'll reopen, probably towards the back end of the year. How would a dairy farmer fit into that overall Acre scheme?
Yes, there's several options there, Vivian, that a dairy farmer might select. Planting new hedgerows, a farmer can plant up to 750 metres of new hedgerow. Riparian margins along rivers and streams. Grassy margins, maybe I didn't mention them, but you can have these grassy margins along field boundaries, and quite a substantial number of those. And you have the riparian zones, a high rate of payment there, and a farmer can have up to 2 hectares of that. And equally, the wild bird cover is open to any farmer, intensive or not.
Okay, and just something that comes to mind, close to my heart, that any dairy farm with stone walls in the South Mayo area that would also benefit from that. Just one more for you, Tommy. Under acres, and Mary maybe alluded to it in her presentation as well, maybe the listeners are getting somewhat confused between the two schemes, but under acres, is there an extra budget you can apply for if scrub is a problem near drinking areas?
Yes, it's something probably I didn't mention too much in my presentation. There are non-productive investments there that will be rolled out later in the year, and farmers have the option of choosing these investments, and the control of scrub and invasive species will certainly be on that list. So that will be available to farmers later on in the year. But for the moment, the CP teams have been newly established, and they're busy, I suppose, identifying the farmers that are accepted into the scheme, and I suppose training those farmers and setting the scorecards that planners will be using during the summer.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And another one, will a farmer get an acres payment in 2023? I presume that's if they're accepted.
Yeah, if a farmer is accepted into the scheme, the plan is to make payments, in the final quarter, possibly of the year, October, November period.
Yeah, yes. If glass is anything to go by, generally the payments come November, December of each year.
Yes.
Yeah, and just a related question from the same viewer: is it is the payment scheme? Sorry, is the payment level due for the continuous consecutive 5 years?
Sorry, say that again now.
Will the payments be made each year of the 5 years, Tom? I suppose I complicated the question somewhat.
Yes, it'll be a 5-year scheme, and the farmer will get the payments for the 5 years, assuming he meets all the requirements of the scheme in terms of training, taking soil samples, and meeting the requirements, of the scheme at all times.
Thanks, Tom. Mary, a couple in for you there, and switch over to Mary now. Thanks, Tom. Mary, in terms of the water quality, are rivers of better quality compared to lakes when you look at it from a water quality point of view?
Yeah, well, I only covered surface waters, and that covers everything. That's rivers, lakes, transitional zones, and coastal. But when we look at it, if we do want to break it down, rivers would be high quality, reckoned to be about 8% high, where the lakes will be 31%. That's the recent figures from the EPA. And if you're looking at the good, rivers will be 42% good, whereas the lakes will be 38% good. So you would overall be kind of getting a higher and better quality in the lakes compared to the actual rivers. Yeah, and that's in the EPA figures that are coming out.
Is that just for Mayo or the whole country?
That's for the whole country,
okay.
But it wouldn't be hugely different for this county. Now, the only thing about this county is that we still have a lot of lakes that actually have unassigned data. Not every lake has been actually tested. When we say these figures, these are the figures for rivers and for lakes that have been evaluated. But just to remember, not every single one out there has yet been evaluated. That's a huge work of progress that they're trying to get to.
And is the plan to evaluate every river and every lake, Mary, over time?
Well, it certainly started off that when they outlined these PAs, these 13 PAs in Mayo, the first thing that they did is they looked to see where were the rivers and the lakes that had an unassigned status, and they went in to assign a status to those within the PAs, so that you'd be looking at a full picture in them. So, like I said, that's what they did in the PAs, and it's just having to broaden it out now, I suppose, to other areas as well.
And another question, Mary, related topic again. Do I pay for a farm plan if my land is in one of those priority areas of action, or PAs as they're commonly known?
No, you don't. It's a free service, and that's why I'd be kind of encouraging people to actually take this up, especially with this new Waters EIP coming down the track. And if you're going to get priority access in based on having a farm plan, they are saying you need fencing or you need alternative drinking water source. I mean, that's something that we do when we're out. No, there is no cost for that plan. It's a free plan, free advisory service. And that's for everybody. It's not for, we are Teagasc advisors. We deal with absolutely everybody. You don't need to be with Teagasc. You can have an advisor outside of Teagasc, or you can have no advisor at all if that's the case. But we'll do a plan for any farmer within a PA, no problem.
Okay. And do I have to do what is recommended in the farm plan that we spoke about in the previous question? And are there penalties for not complying with the work outlined?
No, as regards that plan, what myself and Peter do is we give recommendations in the plan as to what you can do on your farm that will have a positive impact on water quality. And it is a recommendation. And no, there are no penalties. But the big thing now, as I said, is up to this point, while we were given the recommendations and hoping that you would do it, in some cases, it was a constraining factor that the farmer did just not have the money and the finance to do it. But now this Waters EIP is going to come in with the finance. So now if we give it as a recommendation, you now hopefully will have a backup of finance to actually carry through that action.
And is that 100% finance, Mary, or is it kind of part finance these works?
They will have a costing on how much it costs. So it should be a cost neutral for, say, if you're fencing off water courses and you're putting in, it's not that you're going to make money, put it that way, but it won't cost you money. And I think that that's how the costing has been done on it. And like I said, a lot of these measures are measures that I see in the long term are probably going to just come down the line anyhow. So if the money is there now, I would strongly encourage people to go for it. And no, it's not that it'll make you money, but now it won't cost you money to put these measures in place. So
I take it from that answer, in a lot of cases, it is 100% kind of financing. If you spend 3,000 on a fence, that you'll recruit that 3,000 in some fashion.
Yes, I know that the department in their tendering process were looking for a list of how much it would cost to implement every measure, and that was work of progress with them. So yeah, as you say, it'll be cost neutral there.
Okay. And where can I find more information about the quality of the water in my area, just for general knowledge, I suppose? Yeah, well, for general knowledge, and this is, you don't have to be within a PA at all, but absolutely every single person out there that is whether they're farming or not, if you log on to www.catchments.ie, that has a map, and you can zoom in on that map into your particular area, and it will show you the river quality and the standards and the evaluating time. So you know when it was last evaluated, but it'll show you the quality of water within your area. Just zoom down in the map into where you are, and it'll show all the rivers that have a figure on them. Now, just be aware that sometimes you will find that there are unassigned rivers and unassigned lakes that they haven't got around to evaluating yet. But if they have been evaluated, you'll be able to see yours, or as close as you can to yourself. Yeah. Okay, Mary, I've one last question for you, and just quickly I'll go back to Tom then with one, and that'll wrap it up. How do I apply for the Lough Carra Life Agri Scheme, or where can I get more information? Well, the Lough Carra Life Scheme was open for expressions of interest there recently, and I know that they have about 80 expressions of interest in. Kieran Flynn is the project manager there. Their office is in Belcarra, and he's there every day if a person drops into him. But if you need any further information, let us know, and we'll send it on, either myself or Peter Comer, and we will give you his information. He told me the last day that while officially he was thinking of closing it, if there's still anyone interested, he will continue to take any expressions of interest that come into him. Thanks, Mary. Quick question for Tom. I presume this question is based on acres, but BPS is coming up now, so maybe that's where it's at. Is there a payment for bogs, Tom, under the acres, or possibly the BPS?
Payments for bogs. Well, certainly under the BPS, if the bog is grazed and farmed, it's part of the forage area of the farm. But if the bog is untouched and not developed or utilised for farming, there should be no payment on it. Yeah, no ANC or no old headage. Okay. Yes. Thanks, Tom. Lovely. I'll hand it back to Brendan to conclude.
Thanks very much there, Vivian. So we're just about out of time this evening, folks. I'd like to thank our two panelists here, Mary Roache from Teagasc Westport and Tom Kelly from Teagasc Ballina, for their help this evening and giving us great presentations there on acres and on water quality. And of course, thanks to Vivian there for facilitating the questions and answers. And indeed, most importantly, thanks to you at home this evening. We had a lot of farmers on this evening, over 170 farmers on, and thanks for engaging with us there tonight. We hope you found this webinar beneficial. We will get the recording uploaded to the Teagasc Mayo YouTube channel in the coming days, so keep an eye out for that. All that's left for me to say is that we'll be here again next week for the final episode in this series, where my colleague Peter Comer from Teagasc Ballina will give us an update here on the new nitrates regulations, which affects all farmers. And Alan Nolan from Teagasc Ballinrobe will be here with us as well, discussing the new proposed suckler cow scheme. So that's happening next week at the same time, with the same link. And with that, it's good night from us all here in Teagasc and Mayo, and we'll see you all again next week at 8 p.m. Good night, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.